How do you know if a writer is any good or not? The classical way to vet a new writer that you may be looking to hire for your company or a freelancer that you're looking to use is to give them a paid writing trial, right? You want to give them a trial. You want to see how they do with live fire, right? How do they do with an example for content for your company, for that context, for the audience, and all of that. This is something that should be a standardized process for almost any company. Most of the time, you're looking to see what kind of quality you get. You're looking to see if you can tell if it was really AI heavy, if it's accurate, if they get you or if they don't, all those kind of things. I wanted to show you, because we are at Winsome Marketing and at Hire a Writer, obviously we are a content agency, so we test writers all of the time. And we have a pretty well standardized process that I think helps set trials up for success. It helps give us the right information that we need to make a decision as fast as possible, which is really the goal, right? Anytime that you put up a call for writers, you're going to get a lot of applicants because AI has replaced a fair amount of writers, and there are a lot of writers out there who live as freelancers, which means they're kind of always looking for clients. So because of that, you need to cut to the chase. Like, you got to get to the point fast, and you got to weed out the lower group as fast as possible, get your leading candidates in place, maybe do a second trial, and then move forward into production. So what I'm going to do today is shed light on what our writer trial kind of templated process looks like, and then what I specifically, as somebody who vets writers all the time, would be looking for, how I would receive the content from them, and what would be like a total deal killer, and then what would be something I may be willing to work with, and then what would be like a home run. So I think this could help writers and people who are vetting writers. So let's dive in. So what I'm going to do is show you first a document that is kind of like a writer trial template that we have here. These are the things that I'm always going to want to give, the pieces of information I'm always going to want to give a writer who's trialing for me. So first, I want to make sure that they understand what digital property, likely a website that they're writing for, and then information about the business that they're writing for. So if you're, trialing writers for your own business, this would be your website and then your company information. Who are you? What do you sell? What is this about? Add in any, as many additional pieces of information as possible that are relevant to a content writer, like branding and audience, right? So if you can give them those pieces of information, a good writer, if you don't give them, will probably ask for them and be like, hey, do you have this? Because they know that that's a valuable piece of information for them to write in a way that you're going to like. I'm always going to put who the writer is on this document just to keep track, and then always going to put who the editor is. I'm always going to put how much I'm willing to pay for this article, so just put that right out front so that there's no misunderstanding. Put the due date, when is it due, and the expected length, about how long do I expect this to be. A couple other things. So I always want to give a resource that includes, like, what do we expect? Okay, you may or may not have something like a copywriting guide for your business. Obviously, I do because I run a copywriting business. So there's a lot of, very specific things that we provide to our writers so that they've got understanding of how to write professionally for us or for our clients or things like that. If you don't have a copywriting guide, that's no problem. What would suffice for most writers would be to provide examples of what you think is excellent. Okay, they need to know what you think is really well written copy. So this could include a page on your website, this could include your blog, or even better, like a couple or 3 blogs that you're like, this is outstanding. Like, this is what excellence looks like. Because that's going to help a writer understand how you're judging them. And that's really, really useful. So you might not have a copywriting guide, no problem, but you probably should have some kind of content in your ecosystem that you would be like, this is the gold standard. And that's going to be really, really helpful for a writer. Secondarily, I always like writers to have a little bit of a clue as to what they're going to be edited on. What isn't fair to a writer is to be like, hey, write this article for SEO. So what I would do if I was given that is be like, okay, I'm going to go to their website. I would ask the question first, is the content on your website written for SEO? To understand, like, what do you think that means, right? Because there are, believe it or not, lots of different opinions. So to understand, like, what you think that means. And then I would ask maybe for something like this, like, what are the SEO criteria? What are you going for? What is your core key phrase? That kind of thing. And then I would have to do a fair amount of due diligence myself. What I prefer to do is provide writers with, that I'm trialing, writers with the SEO copy checklist. So they know these are the criteria for this to qualify as a good piece of SEO copy. Another advantage to providing these resources to a writer that you're testing out, like content that you think is great and an editor checklist, is you will immediately be able to tell, based on the content you receive from them, if they know how to follow directions. If they looked at the resources that you provided, which is an imperative for a good copywriter. And a lot of them might not, right? So if you get content back and you have said to them, okay, look, here's the SEO editor checklist. This is everything that you're going to be judged on. And you open the document and it doesn't have an H1 with the tier 1 keyword, you don't have to keep reading. Don't hire them. Like, they're not making the right choices. They're not paying attention to what you're telling them. And if they don't pay attention in this, which is supposed to be like their best foot forward, then they're really not going to pay attention once they're comfortable. Okay. So giving them these guidelines and giving these, standards and frameworks and stuff isn't like cheating the code. Be like, okay, well, they need to know how to do this without being told. I mean, tell them what you're editing them on, and then hopefully they can align to best practice. And if they can, everyone wins. Okay. So I like to make sure that they have, some resources. Here's how you're going to be judged. And then if there were any style guidelines, goals, points of focus that you would say aren't super obvious in the outline that you provide, please don't give writers a title and then ask them to write an article. That's so unfair. And it's not helping you learn what you need to learn about their abilities. It's not helping them do a good job. Give as much information as possible about what this is supposed to be, about what this is supposed to achieve, and then provide an outline. So give an outline. It doesn't always have to have all the H2s and the H3s and things like that, but I find an outline like this is pretty helpful for most writers, where it's like, here's basically what this article needs to say. Now, a good writer should be able to do this themselves, but maybe they can, maybe they can't. And especially if you're trying to do this economically and not pay like $1 million per article for all these writers that may or may not be any good, setting them up for success like this means they have to do less research, and you can maybe pay them a little bit less for the trial, right? Because it's like, hey, you already have like the bones. Now you just have to fill it in, okay? But you'll find out a lot based on how they fill it in. So don't think that you're not going to get an accurate view of their skills. You will. All right. And then that's pretty much it. And then kind of tell them, okay, this has to have these internal links. Here's a bunch of resources that I would, give. If I feel like it's really hard to find resources on something, I make sure that I, get kind of clarity from the client or from the SME or whatever, so that they understand, what's expected as far as that area, that kind of thing. And then they're expected to submit. So that should be a pretty effective way to find out if a writer is any good, is to trial them with a piece that has these categories in it. You've got all the content that they need to succeed. This is what they do. When they get it back to you, so first of all, it better come back on time, or preferably a day early. That's just kind of how I operate. Like, a procrastinator and a writer should not be the same person. Because writers, you never really know how long something's going to take until you get into it, and writers who wait till the last minute are not going to be reliable for you. So I would not, if somebody submits it late, I kind of just write them. I probably wouldn't even work with them unless it was a really specific extenuating circumstance. The second thing you're going to look for automatically is, did they do what they were told to do? Does it have the right title? If you walked it through the editor checklist, would it pass? That's super important, right? Are all of the technical components of the article there? Because that's telling you whether or not they can follow directions. The next thing I would say is just read the first line. What I'm about to say is probably going to sound a little bit callous to people, especially if you're a writer out there looking for work. I will read your first sentence. If I don't like your first sentence, I will not keep reading. Because that should be your money shot. The first sentence of an article should be interesting. It should pull me in. It should be meaningful. It should be the best written part of an article, because everything rides on it. Everything rides on whether or not that first sentence pulls somebody in to read more. And so if the first sentence is clunky, if it's wordy, if it's hard to get through, if it's anything that I don't like or I'm turned off by, I'm done. I don't read more, because I've seen all I need to see. And I know that's unfair, but life isn't fair. Right? This is a skill. You're measured on it. You're judged on it. This is a trial. I would say that the lack of skill and not being able to put together a good opener is in and of itself pretty much enough to disqualify somebody. Let's say the opener is okay. It's either tolerable or good. Keep reading, keep skimming, keep scanning. You go through it, make sure it has a logical flow. Make sure you like the tone. Make sure you feel like it's matching luggage, right? Like they should have done their due diligence. If they were given your website, they were given branding information, they were giving audience information, all of that. They should be able to morph into your brand pretty well, at least good enough, right? And you should be able to see signs that they would get better over time, right? So if they've picked up clues, if they've inferred things, if they've mimicked language that they saw on your website, you want to look for signs of what they put into it, of the thoughtfulness that they put into it. You want to check links, check all their references. Like, did they, when they referenced statistics or things like that, were they current? Are they from reputable sources? These are just things that you want to make sure, like, they're a capable researcher. You're not going to have to be, like, going behind them, taking all their work to make sure that they actually did, things that are reasonable and reputable and all of that. And then the last thing, so let's say it was a good enough opener, I got through it, everything's checking out, the flow makes sense, it's logical, there's not a lot of extraneous words, they don't go on and on randomly, like they cover the material, all done. I always look at the ending. Do they end on a high note? Do they summarize what they said? Do they leave me wanting more? Do they give the CTA like I asked? Making sure that the ending kind of is that bracket, that second big component that is the MVP part of the copy. Is that well done? And all of that together is going to give you a pretty solid impression of whether a writer has done their best and done a good job. Every so often, you will find writers who are coming in subpar, but things like their rates or things like their just season of business, maybe they're very green, give you the ability to say, maybe this person's teachable. So let's say you get a piece of copy and you would say, like, okay, this isn't a front runner for somebody we're hiring right now, but I do see potential. Like, they clearly tried, they put a lot of effort into it. I see the effort, all of this, it's just not good enough. Sometimes with those people, the best thing to do is edit the heck out of it in suggestion mode, like red line that sucker, and graciously, but truly correct them and say, like, this didn't work, this didn't make sense, I don't understand why this resource is here, this is missing, whatever, right? Give them feedback and then give it back to them. And that is a way that we test if a writer has potential, because the way a writer responds to that feedback will tell you what you need to know. If they're gracious about it, if they agree with you, if they thank you, cool. If they're like combative and they're like, well, no, I didn't do that, or I made this decision, or what, you're done. They're not teachable, okay? So they're not good enough and they're not teachable. You can't work with that, right? But you can work with people who are teachable. So I would just say that's kind of the only caveat to, like, as you're triaging writers and you're testing writers out there, you may find those that are kind of on the good enough scale that you want to consider using, but you need a little bit more information, and giving them a really thorough edit is probably the best way to achieve that. Okay, I wish you luck. Finding writers is not easy. I know, we hire them all the time. If you know any great writers, send them our way, winsomemarketing.com or hirewriter.us. We always have writers in the mix. And then if you're looking for writers, we also have a lot of them. So happy to help in that way as well, and I wish you the best of luck.